It was late, and Nathan had been staring at his computer screen for hours. The house was quiet, too quiet. The ticking of the clock on the wall was the only sound keeping him company as he worked, trying to finish a project that was due the next day. He rubbed his tired eyes and stood up to stretch. The window beside his desk reflected the dimly lit room, casting a ghostly image of the furniture and himself. But as he looked closer, he noticed something strange in the reflection. There was a figure standing in the hallway behind him. His breath caught in his throat. He spun around quickly, eyes scanning the darkened corridor. There was nothing there, just the familiar sight of the hallway leading to his bedroom. He let out a shaky laugh, brushing it off as his tired mind playing tricks on him. He turned back to the window. The figure was still there. It stood in the same spot in the reflection, but this time it was closer. A tall, shadowy shape, featureless and still. Nathan's stomach dropped. He stared at the reflection, refusing to turn around again. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Was this some kind of optical illusion? Summoning his courage, he slowly walked toward the hallway, his eyes fixed on the window the entire time. The figure didn't move. It just watched, its presence a silent weight pressing down on him. He reached the doorway and cautiously stuck his head around the corner. Nothing. The hallway was empty. Nathan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding and turned back to his desk. But when he glanced at the window again, the figure was gone. He exhaled, laughing nervously. "You're losing it," he muttered to himself, shaking off the eerie feeling. But just as he sat back down, his phone rang. He jumped, startled by the sudden noise. Picking it up, he saw it was from an unknown number. His hands trembled as he hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello," a soft, raspy voice whispered on the other end. "Turn around." His heart stopped. He sat frozen, staring straight ahead at the window. Slowly, his eyes drifted to the reflection. The figure was back, standing right behind him, closer than ever. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The voice whispered again, this time with a dark, mocking tone. "I said turn around." It was nearly 2 a.m. when Sarah's phone rang, piercing the silence of her dimly lit bedroom. She had fallen asleep on the couch, too exhausted from the long day to bother going to bed. Groggily, she picked up her phone, squinting at the screen. The number was unknown. For a moment, she thought about ignoring it, but something about the call felt urgent. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Hello," she said, her voice shaky with sleep. At first, there was nothing but silence on the other end. Then, after a few seconds, she heard faint breathing. "Hello," she repeated, a bit louder. A voice finally answered, low and distant, barely above a whisper. "Come outside." Her heart skipped a beat. She sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. "Who is this?" The voice repeated, a little more insistent now. "Come outside." Sarah's pulse quickened. She glanced toward the window, the curtains drawn tightly shut. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the strange request. "Why would I do that?" The voice paused, then spoke again, as if it hadn't heard her question. "We're waiting." Sarah froze. "We?" She shot up from the couch, her eyes darting to the front door. It was locked. She double-checked the windows. All closed. Her fingers shook as she clutched the phone. "Who's waiting? What do you want?" No response. For several agonizing seconds, there was only silence on the line, the kind that felt like it stretched on forever. Then, just as she was about to hang up, the voice returned, closer this time. "We're right outside." Sarah's blood ran cold. She could feel her heart pounding in her throat. The idea that someone, or worse, several people, were standing just outside her home sent a wave of terror through her. Slowly, as if drawn by some unseen force, she made her way to the window. Her hands trembled as she reached for the curtain. With one swift motion, she pulled it aside. The street was empty. No one was there. The night was still and dark, the quiet only broken by the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. She breathed out a sigh of relief, her panic momentarily easing. It must have been a prank, someone messing with her. She was about to close the curtain when her phone buzzed again. Another call. The same unknown number. With shaking hands, she answered. "Come outside." The voice was sharper this time, more urgent. "Look closer." Her heart raced as she slowly turned her gaze back to the window, her breath catching in her throat. Her eyes adjusted to the shadows, scanning the empty street. And then she saw it, a figure standing in the shadows, so still she had almost missed it. It was standing just beyond the reach of the streetlight, its face hidden in darkness. She dropped the phone, her body frozen in terror as the figure took a slow step toward her window. The rain tapped lightly against the window as James sat alone in his living room. It was a quiet night, the kind where every little sound seemed to echo through the empty house. He checked the time on his phone. 1:47 a.m. Too late to be up, but sleep felt impossible. He got up to pour himself another cup of coffee when a faint sound caught his ear. It was almost like a whisper. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the more he listened, the more it seemed deliberate. He stood frozen, his hand halfway to the coffee pot. The whispering grew louder, but it was faint enough that he couldn't make out the words. It was coming from the window. Slowly, James approached, peering out through the rain-speckled glass. There was nothing outside but darkness, the streetlights casting long, wet shadows across the empty road. But the whisper persisted, closer now, as if someone were right there, just outside the glass. He backed away, his heart thudding in his chest. The whisper stopped, leaving the house in an eerie, deafening silence. He took a deep breath and tried to shake off the feeling. Maybe he was just tired, his mind playing tricks on him. But as he turned to leave, there it was again, closer this time. "James." The voice was unmistakable now, a soft, raspy whisper, calling his name. He spun around, staring at the window, but there was nothing there. His reflection in the glass stared back at him, pale and wide-eyed. He swallowed hard, refusing to believe what he had heard. It was impossible. Then the whisper came again, louder, more urgent. "James, come outside." His blood ran cold. He backed away from the window, his pulse racing. Who was calling his name? How did they know he was alone? Trembling, he grabbed his phone and dialed 911, but the call wouldn't go through. The screen flickered and went black, as if the battery had suddenly died. The whisper came again, now from every direction, filling the room. His name, over and over. And then, the window began to open, slowly creaking upward. A gust of freezing wind rushed in, and James stumbled back, too terrified to move as the shadowy figure stepped through the gap, whispering his name with a voice full of hunger. It was past midnight when Emily heard the faint creak from the hallway. Alone in her small apartment, she had convinced herself that every noise was just the old building settling, but this time it felt different. The sound was deliberate, like footsteps. She sat up in bed, heart racing. The darkness outside her window pressed against the glass, as if trying to seep in. She listened intently, straining to hear through the pounding of her own heartbeat. The floorboards in the hall groaned again, slowly, methodically. Emily reached for her phone, but the screen stayed black. No signal, no battery. She cursed under her breath, feeling the walls of her safe space closing in. Gathering her courage, she slid out of bed and tiptoed toward the door, holding her breath. The hallway stretched out before her, shrouded in shadow. The dim light from the street barely reached inside, casting long, eerie shapes across the floor. She felt the cold grip of fear as she scanned the corridor. Nothing moved. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadow, darker than the rest, slipping behind the door at the end of the hall. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a trick of the light. Someone or something was in the apartment with her. Frozen in place, Emily couldn't move. She could feel its presence now, like a weight in the air, a coldness that crept into her bones. Slowly, the door began to open, revealing the outline of a figure standing in the dark. Its face was hidden in shadow, but she could feel its eyes on her, watching, waiting. She stepped back, her legs trembling, but the figure moved forward, inch by inch. The silence was suffocating. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. And then the lights flickered and went out,